The wind howled through the barren plains as dusk bled into a cold, merciless night. A boy, no older than 12, trudged along the dirt road, his bare feet cracked and bleeding, clutching his mother's trembling hand. Her breaths came shallow, each one a battle she seemed to be losing. The woman's faded shawl did little to guard her from the wind that sliced through the open prairie, and her once bright eyes now carried the dull glaze of exhaustion. Behind them, a broken wagon sat half sunk in the mud, the last remnant of everything they once owned. The boy, Tommy, had been walking since dawn, whispering to his mother that they'd find help soon, though his own hope had begun to fade hours ago. The land stretched endlessly, golden fields turned gray under the dying light, fences leaning like tired old men. When the first flicker of a lantern appeared on the horizon, Tommy felt a tear roll down his dusty cheek. He wasn't crying from sadness this time, but from a spark of something he hadn't felt in days, relief. He half carried his mother toward the light, and as they drew closer, a massive wooden barn came into view, red paint peeling, smoke curling from the chimney of a nearby farmhouse. The smell of hay and horses drifted through the air, and for a moment, Tommy imagined what it might feel like to be warm again. He reached the barn door and hesitated. Inside, he heard the shuffle of boots, the scrape of metal, and the low murmur of a man's voice. His mother swayed beside him, whispering weakly, "Don't bother anyone, Tommy. We'll find a place." But Tommy shook his head. He couldn't let her sleep in the cold again. He took a deep breath, pushed the heavy door open, and stepped inside. A tall man stood by a stall, repairing a bridle. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hat, his frame broad and rough from years of labor. A lantern hung from a beam, casting golden light across the barn. He looked up slowly when the boy spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Sir." The man didn't answer at first, just squinted toward the doorway where Tommy stood holding his mother up. "Sir," Tommy tried again, voice trembling, "if I sweep your barn, would you let us sleep here tonight? Mama's too weak to walk another mile." The man's hands froze. For a moment, there was only silence, heavy and thick, broken only by the snort of a horse nearby. Then he set the bridle down and stepped forward. His boots hit the ground like thunder. Tommy instinctively took a step back, shielding his mother, though she barely stood now, her body sagging like a sack of feathers. The men stopped just a few feet away, studying the pair. The boy's face was smeared with dirt, his hair wild, his clothes torn beyond mending. The woman looked worse, her lips pale, her skin grayish from hunger and cold. "You from around here?" the man finally asked, his voice deep and gravelly. "No, sir," Tommy replied quickly. "We was west, but the wagon broke. We ain't got nowhere else to go." The man's eyes flickered toward the barn's open door, to the wagon barely visible in the fading light, then back to the boy. "You'll freeze out there," he muttered. "Yes, sir," Tommy said, swallowing hard. "That's why I thought, maybe I could sweep your barn. Earn a place to stay. Just for tonight." For a long time, the man said nothing. Then he turned, grabbed a folded blanket from a hook, and tossed it toward the boy. "She can lie in the corner there," he said, nodding toward a pile of hay. "You can help me close up after." Tommy's chest tightened with relief. "Thank you, sir," he said quickly, helping his mother to the hay. She tried to protest, but her voice cracked and vanished into a cough. The man fetched a tin cup and filled it with warm milk from a pail, setting it beside her. "She needs food," he said roughly, as though annoyed by his own kindness. "I'll bring something." Tommy sat beside his mother, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at the man's shadow retreating toward the farmhouse. "He didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You shouldn't have asked, Tommy." The boy wiped a tear from her cheek. "He's kind, Mama. He just don't talk much, that's all." She gave a weak smile. "Kind men don't always wear kind faces," she murmured, drifting into sleep. When the men returned, he carried a pot of stew and 2 wooden bowls. "Eat," he said simply. Tommy hesitated, unsure if it was really for them. The men grunted, setting the pot down harder than necessary. "Ain't gonna eat itself, boy." Tommy thanked him again and helped his mother eat. The warmth spread through their bodies like sunlight, and for the first time in days, Tommy saw color return to her cheeks. When she fell asleep, he rose quietly and began sweeping the barn, just as he'd promised. He moved the broom with quiet determination, clearing dust from the corners, lining up tools neatly on the wall. The men watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't have to do that now," he said. Tommy looked up, startled. "But I said I would." The men studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself." As the hours passed, a strange peace settled in the barn. The wind outside softened, replaced by the creak of timbers and the gentle rustle of horses. The men finally spoke again. "Name's Wade," he said, still watching the boy sweep. "Yours?" "Tommy, sir." "You're ma sick?" "Just tired, I think," Tommy replied. "Ain't eaten right in days." Wade sighed. "Ain't right, a woman and child walkin' this road alone." Tommy said nothing. He just kept sweeping, his hands shaking from fatigue. Wade finally took the broom from him. "That's enough. Get some sleep." Tommy hesitated before lying down beside his mother. "Thank you, Mr. Wade," he said softly. Wade grunted, pretending not to hear. But that night, as he sat by the stove in his farmhouse, he couldn't get the image of the boy out of his head. Small, shivering, but standing tall for his mother's sake. It stirred something old in him, something he'd buried with his own family years ago. At dawn, Wade went back to the barn. The boy was already awake, feeding the horses from a bucket he could barely lift. "You got no quit in you, do you?" Wade muttered. Tommy smiled faintly. "Mama says if you stop trying, you stop living." That morning, Wade invited them into the house. He said it was just until the woman got her strength back, but when days turned into weeks, nobody mentioned leaving. The woman helped in the kitchen when she could, and Tommy followed Wade everywhere, fixing fences, grooming horses, mending harnesses. He learned fast, worked hard, and listened even harder. Sometimes, Wade caught himself talking, really talking, about things he hadn't said aloud in years: his late wife, the years of drought, the loneliness that crept in like winter fog. And sometimes, when he'd finished talking, he'd notice Tommy watching him with quiet respect. But one night, the woman's cough worsened. Wade rode into town for medicine, but it was too late. When he returned, Tommy was sitting beside her, holding her still hand. His small frame shook with silent sobs. Wade's heart broke clean in two. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He just sat beside the boy until morning. After the burial, Tommy packed his few belongings and turned to Wade. "Thank you for everything, sir," he said softly. "Mama's gone now. I'll move on." Wade frowned. "Move on to what?" "I can work for food," Tommy replied. "I'll be fine." Wade stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're stayin' here, boy. Ain't no reason you should walk another mile alone." Tears filled Tommy's eyes. For the first time in his life, he felt something that wasn't hunger or fear, it was belonging. He nodded slowly. From that day forward, the old rancher and the orphaned boy worked side by side. The barn that once sheltered strangers became a home built on quiet gratitude, hard work, and the kind of love that never needed words. Every evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills, Wade would look out across his land and see Tommy laughing with the horses, and he'd whisper to himself, "Guess the Lord knew what he was doing when he sent that boy to my door." And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Tommy swore he could hear his mother's voice, soft and proud, "You kept your promise, son."